Well, hello, History 131. And this week we've got two chapters. And the first one we're going to deal with is colliding cultures. And this particular video is not going to be very long because I'm really wanting us to spend more time with British North America than I am some of the antecedent explorations and empires or settlements or whatever we want to call them in this new world. So we're going to get started here. One of those, when I was putting this together, I remember back to the days when me and my buddies used to play ColecoVision, and there was Mike Tyson's Punch Out and a couple of other things, and this is one of the images from that game, and it kind of embodies what this exploration period and this settlement period is going to be like for various European countries and the Amerindians at the time. So when we do this, we have to start off with the Protestant Revolt, which really and truly sounds like what we're dealing with is a European history class, but it plays itself into the Americas and into America itself. And you have to start off with Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. And what happens when he posts those 95 Theses on the door of the church at Wittenberg, it changes the religious dynamic, and by like token, it changes the entire political dynamic of Europe and kind of sets part of the stage for what's going to go on in the Americas. And this Reformation loosens up the power of the Pope and the Catholic Church. It loosens it a great deal, whereas the Pope liked to be what we would call a Caesaropapist. This idea that the Pope is both pontiff or religious, leader, and he's also a secular leader and can make rules about it, like with the Treaty of Tordesillas and some of those other things that the Pope could determine who could settle and colonize where. All of that, that comes to an end with the Reformation. And so Martin Luther is going to start that. And so there we go, demise of Caesaropapism there. So what does this do? Okay, what does this do, and how does it create problems? Well, we come to John Calvin, or Jean Calvin, as we would say, and his ideas of predestination, which is going to play tremendously into the Massachusetts Bay Colony and so in the northern colony areas of what's going to become the United States. And so we get that. And then in other countries, like, sorry, you can't see it because my gigantic head's in the way there. You get other ones. All, the France, the Netherlands, England are experiencing these powerful Protestant movements. And what you don't see there is Spain, which is going to be the original gigantic empire here in America, the original exploratory, group. They don't undergo this. They're a solidly Roman Catholic, society. So what you end up with is you have the Protestant countries doing one thing, and you have the Catholic Spain and Portugal doing something else over here. So there's going to be a religious friction element in this exploration and colonization of the quote New World. Now, what does it have to do with it? Hey, here we go. Number one is, if you're the Roman Catholic Church, i.e., the Spanish, your idea is you have to bring glory to the Roman Catholic Church. Matter of fact, there's going to be this time with the Native Americans where this idea of them being enslaved, and then it becomes the church is like, no, you can't do that. You have to allow them, because they're heathens. We have to allow them to convert. So they came up with this idea of something called the requirimiento, and as you had to give them this opportunity, hey, you need to convert to Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and then we won't enslave you. Now that sounds like, in our world of the 21st century, it sounds a little odd, but back in the 16th century, this is incredibly liberal and progressive. The only problem was the requirimiento was in Latin, and Amerindians don't speak Latin. Okay, so but anyway, the idea here is to bring that glory to the church, and it creates a split. So now, those Protestant countries, the Netherlands, the French, the British, they can rival that. All right, so our religion's better. Why is it better? Because look at our colonies over here. Look at the money that we're bringing in. Or the Spanish are like, no, 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 no. It's the exact opposite. So it's kind of like during the Cold War, the Americans versus the Soviet Union. I remember watching the Miracle on Ice live. I was in third grade in 1980 when that happened, and it was American society is better because we have more gold medals. Well, here it is. Roman Catholicism is better because we have more gold coins and more stuff. No, 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 no. Protestantism is better because we have more stuff. It sounds silly to us, but to them at that time, that was very real. Okay, and that money, it doesn't stay in those colonies. It comes home. I mean, it's kind of like an investment. It's their version of the stock market of the day, to use a modern twist on it. And so we got to keep in mind the big picture here, that there is a race to explore, okay? Because there is only so much land over here, though they're not sure how much there is. There's a race, and you've got to get on it. And if you're slow in that race, you're going to get left out, which is interesting because England is the slowest one, even though we know in North America that they win the race, okay? And those trade routes equal wealth because there's so many things over here that they're going to find that they won't. Okay, so that means that wealth is coming to your country. The more that mercantilism, that more gold that you have, you win. Okay, and then again, like I said, you got to get it before anybody else does, because if not, it's going to be gone. And if we were sitting in class, I would describe this as if I had a trash bag full of $100 bills and I threw it in the floor and I said, "Y'all go get it." What's going to happen? A mad scramble is going to ensue. Somebody's hair is getting pulled. Somebody's eyes getting poked. Somebody's getting punched because we want that money. And so there is an element of greed in this whole idea of exploration and colonization that cannot be ignored. And lastly, here, those rivalries. The rivalries in Europe have been going on basically since the fall of the Roman Empire and the dissolution of Charlemagne's Carolingian kingdom. And now we've got a new stage. We're somewhere else. There's a lot of things to be had, and nobody wants to be left out. So those rivalries from back home in Europe are coming home over here in the Americas. And they're still happening back in Europe too, so we can never, ever forget that. All right, so who ended up being the main players? Well, number one, the Spanish. Well, I got a duh. And the Portuguese, a double duh, because they're the first ones out and about doing this. Okay, so if you're number one, you got first dibs at it. Then the French get in on it. We tend to forget that unless we watch the movie Last of the Mohicans. We tend to forget that the French were a huge player in exploration and colonization. Then the Dutch. Okay, the Dutch, huh? What? Yeah, New York. The New York and New Jersey areas was where they explored and colonized. The Swedes as well in that same area. Okay, the French, maybe we've got a little bit of knowledge of that. Dutch, really? Swedes, really? Okay, they're long forgotten because apparently they lose this race, which is absolutely true. And then the English get in late, but they are able, with their gigantic fleet of ships and their humongous navy and a stroke of incredible good luck, they're able to get in it late and yet make up ground and win. All right. So if we look at New France, that's a pretty cool hat my man in the middle's got on there. People like Giovanni de Verrazzano, Jacques Cartier, Henry IV, the Huguenots, and the Edict of Nantes. What ends up happening here is the French have their own issues between Catholicism and Protestantism, and they were looking for areas to settle. If you go down to Charleston and Savannah to this day, there were, huge is not the right word, but comparatively large Huguenot communities in both cities. So people are looking for a way out due to religious strife. They're also looking for a way to get rich. They're looking for a way to provide glory for their own country. Samuel Champlain as well. But check out this guy. I mean, he's got a cooler hat than the other guy. The Corps de Bois, the Boys of the Woods. Back then there was no such thing as polar fleece or any of that cool stuff that we wear today to stay warm. There were furs, and that was a monster trade back then. They were huge. They were very expensive because they had been hunted almost to extinction in Europe. And then, so they're over here getting this stuff, sending it back, making, a lot of money. Then you got the religious element with the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus coming over. Let's Christianize and civilize the Native Americans. Okay, that again is a huge deal. The Society of the Jesuits being an offshoot of Catholicism, They're trying to bring that glory back for the Roman Catholic Church. Now, these fellows over here, fur trading, they got, as one of my old coaches used to say, got too big for their britches. And so whether the French are trying to rein that in a little bit, if they can control this fur trade a little better, that money can come home to the crown. And as we're going to see as we get toward the French Revolution in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they need the money, but that's a different animal for a different day. So we have New France, which is what they're going to call their area here in America. It's under Louis the 14th. I mean, he's got a cool little, thing going on there. He's got a neat little hairdo going. Heck of a good bathrobe, it looks like. But New France is going to be a real model of absolutism. It's very peaceful because there are, Native Americans or Amerindians. There are the French settlers themselves. It is orderly, it is deferential. It's a huge area, so you don't have enough people to reach critical mass, and it's all ruled under the auspices of the king, under Louis the 14th. Okay? Now, a quarter of the ones that get sent over here are centered on Quebec. So they're in one spot. And if everybody's in one spot, it's easier to keep an eye on them. It's easier to control them. And that's what the French are going to be able to do for a long time. And eventually there's going to be some issues. Okay? Now, I put here that New France is a relative failure. It is. In the grand scheme of things, it is a failure, because the French didn't want to live up there in what we would now call Canada, or west of the Appalachian Mountains in what is now Ohio, Michigan, that area. They like the warm Caribbean climate better. Okay, I get it. It's, I'd like it much better myself. But one of the reasons is not just because the weather's cold and Jimmy Buffett, might be down there singing. It was because of Spanish shipping, and the Spanish are sending gold out hand over fist, and they could prey on it. They could send out privateers, or pirates as we may want to call them, send them out to if they sink it, hey, that's gold not going to Spain. If you take the ship, that's gold that you get, or the stuff that you get, the molasses or rum or things like that. So it is a lucrative endeavor. I mean, basically they're organized thieves. And so you've got coffee and sugar right there in the Caribbean as well. And the two things that, I drink every morning, coffee with sugar in it. It becomes a big trade. I mean, imagine a day without coffee. Ooh, I don't even want to think about that. And so what happens is those Caribbean colonies, like Haiti and whatnot, they become worth much more than the Canadian colonies, which we tend to focus on because of their role in the American Revolution and in the earlier French and Indian War. So if we keep a scoreboard here, the scoreboard, first of all, is the French. Woohoo, look at them spin. There are not many people. They do have a very lucrative fur trade. They are ruled by the crown exclusively. There's no idea of self-government here, which is going to be a theme in the British colonies. Right? There are some religious issues, Huguenots, Catholics, okay. That's not going to play a huge part in the history of the United States, which is what we're dealing with, but you do need to know that it's there. All right. And so we're looking at Canada, we're looking at Mid-America, and we're looking at the Caribbean, though I don't have that on here because that's not going to play a role in American history until the time of Napoleon. All right. So we get away from the French, we go to the Dutch and the Swedish settlements. Now, first thing, they're more active than the French were, and that's kind of hard to believe in the 21st century in the way most of our textbooks are written, but they were. For a time, the Dutch were incredibly active, and profit is their motivation because they had this monster, economic empire that is just kind of faded from our mindset, but they want to make money, and they did for a long time. They really did. Now, I used to say that the Swiss weren't important, but the Swiss cake rolls were, okay, which is not really true, but I think it's kind of funny in that what ends up happening is their colonization in the Americas is so small and it's so economic oriented that eventually, as the British and the French and even the Spanish to a lesser degree, as their colonies expand, the Dutch and the Swedes are inevitably going to get pushed out, and that's what happens. So you get a couple of companies here, the East and the West India companies, and these are basically like like a conglomerate that is designed to people invest in it, and it's designed to make money for them, like New Amsterdam, Fort Orange. All of those things in the West Indies are not as profitable as the East India Company. Now, New Amsterdam and Fort Orange are up in the modern New York area, and they're just not as profitable as the East Indies, where you have molasses, sugar, rum, coffee, all that good stuff that is readily that are these great commodities that people can use day after day, and they really won't. So again, that profit motive takes over, and it's not a, hey, we're going to try to create an entirely new living area, we've got an appendage for our nation. It is about making money. Right. We're not going to worry about patroon ships because you're never going to see that again. So New Netherland, it is a pluralistic society. All right. And what happens is this. Like everybody else, they're going to get in conflict with the Native Americans, and they have war with the nearby Algonquin Indians. And their religion is very pluralistic. When the Catholic, you can be Protestant, Calvinist, Lutheran, whatever, and it makes it very attractive for people. And that might stimulate the trade, but the war with the Native Americans is going to make it very unattractive for a period of time. And so the Swedes. So the Swedes here, what happens is they get close to this same particular area. Them and the English are going to begin to encroach on that area with the Dutch, and the English are going to settle around Chesapeake Bay, and that's going to be Jamestown. We're going to see that here in a little bit. And they settle up in New England, up in what is now modern Massachusetts. And so you have them kind of bumped in on both sides. And so the Dutch are going to be in a little bit of a pickle there. And so sometimes we call it the Dutch wedge because it sits in much like a triangle, separating the two areas of the British colonies. And so something has to happen with that Dutch wedge. It's going to have to go away. As you can see, if you're the British and you really wanted to use this to make money. And that leads us to this right here, which is a headbutt between these two groups of people. Now, so let's look at the scorecard as we finish this part up. We've got the French. We've already seen that. Now we got the Dutch and the other people. They don't have many folks either. That's going to be the problem that the French, the Dutch, and the Swedes have, is the number of people. The British are going to have, or the English are going to have a whole lot of people. The Spanish have a solid number of people, but these other groups do not. And they're in a small area, and their estates are huge, or sometimes, they may refer to them as plantations, but that makes them very weak and very vulnerable, and that's going to become a problem. And that's why the Dutch and the Swedes are going to end up being erased from the North American